The last year or so has arguably been the best time ever for the budget PC gamer. AMD's latest processor offerings with integrated graphics can give you a pretty decent gaming experience without even having to buy a GPU. Combine that with lower storage costs and increased specs on lower end motherboards, and you can get a decent gaming PC for under $450. Now that's pretty cheap considering it's all brand new parts, but we wanted to go a step further. We wanted to get the same or better performance on a PC that's less than half the price. Obviously, we weren't going to be able to do this using brand new parts. So we're using sites like eBay, Craigslist, and Letgo to make sure that we're getting decent parts, but on the used market. Also, we set some criteria for this PC. First of all, we wanted this to be considered a gaming PC by today's standards. That means I can't just go and buy an old $50 junker PC that can barely run Minesweeper and say,
oh look, it's a gaming PC.
No, we wanted this to be able to run modern esports titles at 1080p and AAA titles at least 720p. Also, we're setting some minimum specifications. So at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I'm gonna say at least a 256 gigabyte hard drive because games today are getting ridiculous. I mean, Call of Duty Modern Warfare is over 190 gigabytes right now. That's freaking insane. Also, I'm looking to get at least 4 threads on the processor, so that eliminates old dual core processors with no hyper-threading because I don't think a dual core processor would hold up in this regard. And obviously we want to do this for at or under $200. So did we do it? Nope. All right, just kidding. The grand total for this machine came in at $199. And no, I didn't actually plan that. That's actually what it came in at. So let's run through the part list and discuss why I chose what I did. So the base of this whole thing came down to finding this old HP desktop from a guy on Letgo who had it listed for only $90, which I didn't even try to do any bargaining because it was such a solid deal at $90 because this comes with an i7 4790, which is a 4-core, 8-thread CPU that's base clock is at 3.6 gigahertz and can boost up to 4. So while that's not, you know, up to the crazy 5.2 gigahertz we get today, it's still pretty adequate for what we're trying to do. It did only come with 4 gigs of RAM, so like I said before, we need at least 8, so that was something I had to upgrade. And while it came with a 500 gigabyte hard drive, I don't feel comfortable installing an operating system on not a solid state drive in the year 2020. And obviously it didn't come with a graphics card, so that would be the 4th and final purchase we needed to make. In terms of RAM, while it did come with 4 gigabytes, I found it a little difficult to find a matching stick on eBay. So I went with a regular 8 gigabyte kit, which was just 2 4 gigabyte sticks for $26. So while I said before we had a 500 gigabyte hard drive, I needed to get a solid state drive. So I went on eBay and found pretty much the cheapest solid state drive I could get from a reputable brand, which came out to be a 128 gigabyte from Lite-On. And this only cost us $18. So the 4th and final piece was the graphics card. And this is where it can kind of make or break you. You have to be pretty careful with the graphics card you pick for this machine because while a better graphics card is going to give you better performance, there's huge diminishing returns once you get past a certain point. And you're limited to factors in an older machine, such as how much power you can supply to it and a bottleneck from the CPU. So the power supply that came in here is actually a 320 watt OEM standard power supply. So that almost eliminates any really high-end graphics cards, but you know, with the budget we set, we weren't gonna get that anyway. So the two I narrowed it down to were an RX 560 from AMD or an NVIDIA 1050 Ti. They're both in the same ballpark when it comes to performance, and usually you can find them within $20 of each other, depending on where you look. I actually came across a guy on Let Go Again who was selling an RX 560 4GB for $75. And after some back and forth, we eventually agreed on $65. So our grand total for all these parts comes out to just at $199. There, we've met all of our specifications for the minimum specs and price, but how does it game? How does it do the one thing we set out to do? And honestly, pretty good. So I tested it with 3 games. First off being League of Legends, my game of choice. And honestly, League of Legends can probably run on a potato. So that wasn't really gonna be a stress for this, but I wanted to make sure that we could max it out. So 1080p, maxed out settings, we got 118 FPS on that. You're not gonna see any issues there. You're gonna be fully maxed out, assuming you're using a 1080p 60 Hertz monitor. Next, we chose Fortnite. Yay. Honestly, I've probably put about 30 total minutes into Fortnite. Loading in, I went with 1080p and I set it to high settings, which was what was recommended by the game. And we were getting about 38 FPS, which is pretty impressive and certainly playable. And I actually toned down the graphics to medium just to see what we would get. And when doing that, it actually went up to about 95 FPS. So that's gonna be buttery smooth if you're willing to sacrifice a little graphics quality for a higher frame rate. It's certainly preference. In my opinion, I'd rather tone down the graphics and get kind of a smoother gameplay, but to each their own. Finally, we wanted to test AAA titles. How would this computer react if we threw an actual high quality, graphically intense game at it? We chose The Witcher 3, which is probably one of my favorite games ever, and I'm pretty happy with it. So loading up The Witcher, we tried 1080p. I wasn't really anticipating this computer to be able to run The Witcher 3 at 1080p, but at 1080p medium settings, we were getting 35 FPS, which was definitely playable. I mean, it looked fine. There were a little bit of jitters and maybe a little bit of lag, but for under $200, I mean, that's pretty sweet. From there, I toned down the resolution to 720p just to see what kind of performance we would get if you're willing to sacrifice on resolution. And with that, we got about 63 FPS, which is pretty much right on point for something you'd want to see if you're running a 60 Hertz monitor. Now, I wanted to make sure we were getting the maximum performance out of our parts, so while gaming, I was checking the thermals to make sure there was no throttling, and lo and behold, everything was pretty much under control, even with the pretty cheap stock fan that came with this machine. Our CPU temperatures never reached over 90 degrees, and our GPU, even while playing The Witcher, only got up to 76 degrees. So well within the limits, and I wouldn't say too close to even thermal throttling. So overall, I'm extremely happy with this machine. The use of an SSD is probably the best way to increase an old desktop's performance, because before it was taking honestly about a minute to get into Windows and to be responsive loading from the hard drive. And with the introduction of an SSD, we're getting into Windows and ready to roll in probably about 15 seconds. So for anyone out there with an old desktop, the first upgrade I would actually make to it, if you're looking to salvage it, is to get an SSD and load your operating system on it. You're gonna see much better performance just out of that one little upgrade. So yeah, wow, for under $200, this is a perfectly capable machine. Now, who is a build like this for? I could see this being for a parent who wants to get their child into PC gaming, but doesn't really want to spend that much money for something that their child might not really like. Or this could be for someone with an extremely limited budget who wants to make sure they're getting an adequate gaming experience and may want to put their money towards other things like a keyboard, mouse, and monitor. And there's no shame in that. We've proven that this is a pretty adequate machine, and impressively enough, it actually came with USB 3. So fairly modern for an older PC. Now we're actually planning to do a similar challenge to this, but instead of a gaming PC, we're going to be building a home server. So if that's something that interests you, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you know when that video comes out. But if you like this video, make sure you drop a like on this one and subscribe if you loved it, and hit that bell so you're notified the next time we post something awesome. See you all in the next one.